Having examined the flood account found in the Epic of Gilgamesh and finding it wanting, we now turn our attention to another aspect of this work. Perhaps there are individuals within its pages that have a degree of honor or righteousness that we can respect. Unfortunately, almost immediately we learn that that is not the case, at least for the first two main characters. These are Gilgamesh and also Enkidu. Gilgamesh is described as one who is 2 parts god and 1 part man, and that he is the king of the city of Uruk. But even though he is the king, the people lament him, and they cry out to their gods concerning him and speak against him, saying things like, "His arrogance has no bounds by day or night." But not only is Gilgamesh one who is arrogant, but also he is lustful and fornicates quite a bit. In the 2nd paragraph, it says, "The gods heard their lament. The gods of heaven cried to the Lord of Uruk, to Anu, the god of Uruk. A goddess made him, strong as a savage bull. None can withstand his arms. No son is left with his father, for Gilgamesh takes them all. And is this the king, the shepherd of his people? His lust leaves no virgin to her lover, neither the warrior's daughter, nor the wife of the noble." And this information about the sheer lust of Gilgamesh continues. We can look on page 68, where we discover that Gilgamesh is so lustful that he has sex with wives on their wedding night before the husband consummates their marriage. It says, "Gilgamesh the king is about to celebrate marriage with the queen of love, and he still demands to be first with the bride, the king to be first, and the husband to follow, for that was ordained by the gods from his birth, from the time the umbilical cord was cut." So you can see why the people would lament this particular king, and why they would want to have someone that would be an appropriate challenge against him, so that the city can have quiet. And what the gods do is they make a man known as Enkidu, who basically behaves like an animal. But before Gilgamesh meets this person, he has a dream concerning him. And in the dream, Gilgamesh sees Enkidu as a sort of a meteor. But the thing is that from this dream we discover that Gilgamesh's lust, his passion, is so great that he even has an attraction to Enkidu. It says on page 66, "And to me its attraction was like the love of woman." And Gilgamesh asks his mother concerning this dream, and she is a bit more explicit. "You will love him as a woman, and he will never forsake you." This is the mother of Gilgamesh speaking to her son, describing another man. And so what do we find about Enkidu? Well, we see that he indeed is one who is a man, but he behaves like any sort of animal. And so initially he has a degree of innocence. On page 63 it says, "He was innocent of mankind. He knew nothing of the cultivated land. He ate grass in the hills with the gazelle. He lurked with the wild beast. And he also rescued various animals from the pits and the traps of the trapper. And the trapper is terrified of Enkidu. And so he gets some advice about what to do about this person, about Enkidu. And we learn that the answer to the trapper's problem is just more sex. On page 63, near the bottom, it says, "Go to Uruk, find Gilgamesh, extol the strength of this wild man. Ask him to give you a harlot, a wanton from the temple of love. Return with her, and let her woman's power overpower this man." So initially, Enkidu is a bit innocent. He behaves like just any sort of animal. But later on, we find that that is no longer the case. Gilgamesh we know as someone who is arrogant and lustful. But we learn later that Enkidu is one who is lacking in mercy. Eventually, Enkidu and Gilgamesh become friends, and they go to the cedar forest and attack the guardian of the forest. And what happens there is that they are successful in defeating the guardian, and the guardian of the forest, known as Humbaba, pleads with Gilgamesh for mercy. On page 82, it says, "Let me go free, Gilgamesh, and I will be your servant. You shall be my lord. All the trees of the forest that I tended on the mountain shall be yours. I will cut them down and build you a palace." And this leads to the heart of Gilgamesh being moved with compassion. So Gilgamesh considers to have mercy on Humbaba. But what does Enkidu say? What is his advice to his friend? On the next page, we find the answer. Enkidu said, "Do not listen, Gilgamesh. This Humbaba must die. Kill Humbaba first, and his servants after." So Enkidu becomes an individual who is lacking in mercy. And eventually he dies, and Gilgamesh weeps for his friend. He bemoans the death of Enkidu. And on page 97 it says, "Bitterly Gilgamesh wept for his friend Enkidu. He wandered over the wilderness as a hunter. He roamed over the plains. In his bitterness he cried, 'How can I rest? How can I be at peace? Despair is in my heart.'" So what would be our answer to our despair? Well, we would want to hopefully seek after God. But let's see what Gilgamesh does instead. "Despair is in my heart. What my brother is now, that shall I be when I am dead. Because I am afraid of death, I will go as best I can to find Utnapishtim, whom they call the Faraway, for he has entered the assembly of the gods." So Gilgamesh is going to go to another man who is said to have everlasting life. And this refrain of his despair, of his fear of death, is something that continues for much of the rest of this particular work. And Gilgamesh goes on a long journey, and he speaks with various individuals and beings. And eventually he comes to a maker of wine, who is known as Siduri. And he speaks of his fear of death. And this woman, Siduri, actually gives probably the best advice in the entire work. She says, "Gilgamesh, where are you hurrying to? You will never find that life for which you are looking. When the gods created man, they allotted to him death, but life they retained in their own keeping. As for you, Gilgamesh, fill your belly with good things. Day and night, night and day, dance and be merry, feast and rejoice. Let your clothes be fresh, bathe yourself in water, cherish the little child that holds your hand, and make your wife happy in your embrace, for this too is the lot of man." And I will be the first to tell you that some of this advice is good. The fact that she speaks of cherishing the little child that holds your hand, that is a positive thing. And to make your wife happy in your embrace, that is also positive. But this person also has a lack of knowledge of the one true God. And so she says things such as, "When the gods created man, they allotted to him death." And yet we can look in Genesis and read of Adam and Eve, and we know that the original intention of God was for Adam and Eve to live forever with God in the Garden of Eden. So even though she has some good advice, it is mainly advice that is of physical nature, and it is some that is not necessarily one that we should follow. So Gilgamesh is lacking in righteousness, Enkidu is lacking in righteousness, Siduri is one who gives us some positive physical advice, but nothing that is really about righteousness itself. So that leaves one last person, and that person is Utnapishtim. Now this is a person who is the Noah figure in the text, and whenever I was doing research concerning the flood account in the Epic of Gilgamesh, people told me that Utnapishtim was one who was viewed as righteous. And yet whenever I look in this flood account, I don't see any indication of that. There is a point where the god Ea speaks to Utnapishtim and tells him to build his boat to tear down his house and that kind of thing. And Utnapishtim asks Ea a question: "How shall I answer the people, the city, the elders?" This is found on page 109. And that is a good question, and some of what Ea says makes sense. But look at what he says for Utnapishtim to say to the people, to the city. It says, "But on you he will rain down abundance, rare fish and shy wild fowl, a rich harvest tide. In the evening the rider of the storm will bring you wheat in torrents." The remarkable thing is these are words that Utnapishtim is to say to the city, to the people. And this is involving a great flood that will destroy the city, destroy the people. It will kill them. And yet he is speaking as if this is a blessing. He says things like rain down abundance, a rich harvest tide. It sounds like it's a blessing that the flood is going to come and slaughter all these people. And yet, whenever I looked into this text, people said that Utnapishtim is righteous. And yet I see no evidence of that. And so, there are no individuals in this work that you can really admire because of their honor, because of their righteousness. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.